Begin Self-Publishing, episode number 68. How to handle reviews with Jay Baer.
Interested in self-publishing but don't know where to start? Want to get your book onto Amazon? Want to hold your paperback book in your hands? Learn how on the Begin Self-Publishing podcast with your host, Tim Lewis.
On today's show, I interview Jay Baer, who is an international speaker and author of the book Hug Your Haters. It's taken me an awful long time to get him on the show. I was really impressed by a speech that he gave at last year's Social Media Marketing World before he started the formal work of actually writing the book Hug Your Haters, and saying quite clearly that actually people should answer reviews. There is a real consensus at the moment within self-publishing that bad reviews should be ignored and that you shouldn't feed the troll. While I certainly think it's great advice not to be abusive towards people in return and emotionally respond to somebody who says they don't like your book, I think the advice to never respond is actually incorrect. Jay made the case for very well in that speech. I've been trying to get him on the show as he's the only person I really know who says this, that you should respond. And now over to the interview. Hi Jay, and welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me. Delighted to be here.
Why is the standard advice authors get to ignore all their reviews not necessarily a good idea?
Well, I'm not really certain how that became the standard advice to ignore reviews. I think it may stem from the fact that, your book is written. It's not like you can change it. It's not as if you're running a restaurant where somebody doesn't like your pork chops. You can go change the pork chop recipe. The book is the book at that point. By the time somebody reviews it, it is already completed. And so there's not much you can do about it. If they don't like it, well, somebody out there will like it. And perhaps that's where that advice came from. But I don't believe it's very good advice.
So if someone basically receives a poor review, what would you suggest that they do? Should they respond to it then?
They absolutely should respond. I certainly respond to the negative reviews that I get on my books because we have to understand that most people don't leave a review. Most people don't complain in any context of our lives. The research that I did for my most recent book, Hug Your Haters, found that out of 100 unhappy customers, not just readers, but any unhappy batch of customers, it could be restaurant patrons, it could be hotel patrons, it could be software buyers. Out of 100 unhappy customers, only 5 will actually complain. So what this means is that the people who actually do complain, who leave a negative review, who call you, who email you, what have you, they're pretty rare. And in most cases, they represent the feelings of a larger batch of customers or readers. And so I think one of the tendencies authors have is to think, well, if this person didn't like the book, that is an isolated occurrence. This one person didn't like the book. But what the research shows is that on average, that one person represents the beliefs of 19 other people. So one negative review equals 20 unhappy readers is really the formula that you should think to be true because the research shows that that's the case. And so you can't dismiss a negative review as a one-time thing, an isolated occurrence, because other people may have had the same thoughts. They just didn't write it down.
Okay, so if someone seems abusive, what is the best way to deal with them?
Well, and I think every time somebody leaves a negative review, you should answer it, and here's why. We're in an environment where customer service of all forms is essentially a spectator sport. It's not like the old days, the pre-internet days, where if you wrote a book and somebody had a negative review, that review would show up in the newspaper, or maybe they would call you or send you a letter and say, I didn't like your book. Now, of course, reviews show up on places like Amazon, etc. And potential buyers of your publication can see all the reviews that have been written in the past, whether Amazon or Goodreads or any places like that. And of course, many prospective buyers will look at the reviews before making a purchase. And so if somebody leaves a negative review, even an abusive review, I believe you should answer those reviews every single time because it shows potential buyers of your book that you're actually listening. Because let's remember, no response is a response. No response from the author is a response that says, I don't care whether or not you like this book. So even if somebody is abusive, I think you should answer them do so without getting into an argument and say, I'm terribly sorry the book didn't meet your expectations. I would love to make it up to you. How can we work together? What I do when I get negative reviews, and I took this idea from my friend Dave Kirpin, who's a terrific author, is if somebody leaves me a 1-star review on a place like Amazon, I say, I'm terribly sorry the book didn't meet your expectations. I will buy you any other book on Amazon to make up for it. Just direct message me, tell me what book you like, and I will buy it for you and send it to you.
Yeah, I suppose that probably makes an impression on people, doesn't it, if you do that?
Of course it does. And yes, I want that person who is unhappy to be happy, but the much bigger impact is all the other people who see that exchange, who are on the fence about whether or not to buy the book. And they're like, wow, this author really stands behind his work. This really is a money-back guarantee for all intents and purposes. I should buy this book. And it's essentially free marketing inside the Amazon reviews system.
Okay. So when you were researching Hug Your Haters, and I know you had research conducted, what was the thing that most surprised you?
Well, the biggest surprise, I would say two things. One, most people and most companies think that they're pretty good at customer service already. The research, not research from me, but research from the organization Bain & Company found that 80% of businesses, and I think authors fall in this category, say that they're pretty good at customer service. Only 8% of customers agree. So 80% think they're good, 8% of customers agree with that. So you have this huge gap between what is and what is perceived to be good customer service. That's the first finding. The second one is that a massive proportion of customer complaints are never responded to. It's about a third. About a third of all customer complaints now are never responded to. And most of those that go unanswered are in social media and review sites. Places like Amazon, Yelp, TripAdvisor, Facebook, Twitter, etc., where, ironically, the whole exchange is public.
Yeah. So what would you say is the difference between those kind of public forums and the more sort of private? If somebody sends you an email personally saying they don't like your book as opposed to somebody putting an Amazon review?
Well, certainly if somebody's going to call you or email you, they have put some additional time into it, right? It requires more of the reader to contact you that way in most cases. And so I certainly am not suggesting that you dismiss telephone or email feedback, quite the contrary. What we found in the research is there's a difference of expectation. So when people complain on the phone or via email or even postal letter, they expect to hear back. About 90% of the time, they expect and anticipate a response because it's just how the world has evolved over the last 15 years. However, when people complain online, Twitter, Facebook, etc., Yelp, TripAdvisor, Amazon, what have you, Goodreads, discussion boards and forums of all kinds, only about half of those people expect to hear back. Now, that's partially because they've been trained to not expect to hear back, right? So many times, if you leave feedback on a social media channel or an Amazon or a Yelp, you just don't hear back. And so we have not come to expect that to be the case. But it's a huge opportunity for authors because so few authors today are answering reviews that if you're the one author in the category that does answer reviews, it differentiates you immediately.
So from what you've heard of people who've been inspired by your book or have used it, what is the most inspiring result you've heard from somebody who's actually applied the principles that they've learned from Hug Your Haters?
Oh, geez, the most inspiring result. I would say the ones that I'm most gratified by are in healthcare, not even on the author side of it. I've done a fair amount of speaking and workshops for hospital systems and insurance companies and all corners of the healthcare ecosystem. And when you have patients who have had, a traumatic experience, have lost a loved one, have had trouble with a hospital or insurance company, and they're frustrated and they're at wit's end, and they turn to Facebook to complain because they couldn't get an answer on the phone, and all of those kind of things that happen a lot, especially in the American healthcare system. And then we, through the power of the book, can help those healthcare organizations answer those patients and those caregivers and give them the information and the solace that they need. That is really, really gratifying and it makes the tremendous amount of work and time and money that went into this book worthwhile.
Okay. So is there anything you would have included or emphasized more today if you were writing it today?
Well, it's funny. I didn't self-publish this book. I worked with Penguin Portfolio, and one of the disadvantages I find with working with a publisher is the cycle time to produce the book. They have a number of checks and balances and a schedule because they have other books that they're publishing, etc. And so from the time I gave them the manuscript until the time that the book came out, it was, I'm doing some quick math here, like 7 months, which is actually pretty quick in a traditional publisher cadence. But 7 months for a book that's about, for all intents and purposes, sort of customer service disruption and how technology has changed customer service, 7 months is a long time. So if I had to write it again today, I would double the length of the chapter about messaging apps, because that is a huge, huge trend in customer service. A year from now, you're going to see businesses of all shapes and sizes, and maybe even authors, which I think is a really interesting idea, having Facebook Messenger chatbots that you can interact with them via text message and things like that. Texting and messaging apps, Facebook and WhatsApp and WeChat and Line and Kik, they are going to be the new email. It's just a matter of time. And that is a massive, massive and important trend that I covered in the book, but I would have covered it even more if I had to redo it today.
So you don't necessarily have to answer this question if anybody from Penguin is listening, but are you tempted to self-publish books in the future?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, every time I've worked with them 4 times now, and I worked with Wiley in my first book, so I've done 5 books with traditional publishers, and every time I do a book, I'm tempted to self-publish, just because of the flexibility and the fact that most of my book sales are associated either directly or indirectly with speaking engagements. And so that would give me more control, and the economics of that is a little different. I could sell books at events at a much higher price point, or I should say I could sell them at the same price point, but I would keep a lot larger percentage of the sale price if I self-published versus went with a traditional publisher. But I have a great relationship with my team at Penguin Portfolio, and I'm fortunate enough that they give me a pretty decent advance to write books now. And so it's essentially a bird in the hand versus 2 in the bush type of a scenario. When they write me an advance check to create a book, I know that the marketing budget for the book is covered. And that's exactly how I think about it. So when they write me a check, I don't think, ta-da, I've made all this money to write a book. I think, great, now I have the marketing covered. And every cent they give me, I turn into marketing, which is why the books tend to launch strong. So that's kind of how I think about it. But I've absolutely been tempted every single time. And next time out, who knows what's going to happen.
Okay, so in terms of what's next for Jay Baer, have you got another book in the works, or are you staying in customer service, or are you moving into another area? So
I was thinking about doing another book in conjunction with Daniel Lemon, who's the author of a book called Manipulated, and he works on our consulting team. It's another book kind of about ratings and reviews. And so we're thinking about doing a book together about how customer service can turn customers into advocates. That's a book that we are starting to play around with, and I have a couple other ideas kind of percolating. But Hug Your Haters has been out about 5 months now, so I've got a little more meat on that bone before I get back into it. So nothing immediate, but there'll be another one at some point.
Okay. So how can people find out about Jay Baer and Hug Your Haters and all the various other projects you've got going?
Oh, sure. So our main website is convinceandconvert.com, convinceandconvert.com. That's our main website, where we've got a blog about digital marketing, content marketing, social media marketing. We produce 6 weekly podcasts. We have a daily email newsletter. So if you're at all interested in marketing, digital marketing, that's the place to go. And the book website is hugyourhaters.com.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for appearing on the show.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Great topic.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please stop by iTunes and rate and leave a review. This helps make the show more visible. For free resources, show notes, and other helpful content, join the community at beginselfpublishing.com.